Hi, my name's Colton,
My name's Sam.
and today we're going to be talking about California wetland conservation. So, first off, we'll talk about why does this matter and what exactly wetlands are. Well, wetlands are defined by the EPA as areas where water covers the soil or is present, either at or near the surface of the soil all year or for varying periods of time during the year, including during the growing season. And I know that sounds very complicated and far too technical, but to break that down a little further, there are two recognized categories of wetlands: coastal wetlands and inland wetlands. Today we're primarily going to be talking about inland wetlands, since the average person, when they think of coastal wetlands, it's primarily like tidal zones or when the river meets the ocean, areas that people like to go and take Instagram pictures or travel to, take picnics, that sort of thing. But we're going to be talking about the far more pristine but not as Instagram-worthy inland wetlands, which conjure up images of swamps, bogs, marshes, places where Shrek would call home generally. Although these areas, like I said, are not particularly Instagram-worthy, they provide society with a variety of beneficial services. They provide flood prevention by their very nature, because they hold vast amounts of water during the rainy season and during snow runoff. They also provide natural filtration of water because of slow movements. Sediment can drop to the bottom of the water and settle, along with being some of the most biologically diverse ecosystems on Earth, comparable to, but not quite as comparable to, rainforests and coral reefs. So, I'm also going to be talking a little bit about the issues facing wetlands. Inland wetlands as a whole, are an extremely fragile ecosystem. According to the EPA, the U.S. loses approximately 60,000 acres of wetlands each year. And as a note of reference, that's approximately 45 and a half football fields every year. By far the largest issue facing wetlands is land development by people, and that includes drainings and dumpings and fillings of wetlands for farmland and urban development. But it's also in smaller cases too, with construction of roads and dikes and levees. Invasive plants and animals are also a huge danger facing wetlands and they contribute to the overall degradation of wetland environments by disturbing native plant species. For example, the nutria, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but I'm going to go with it. It's a large semi-aquatic rodent native to South America that has been brought up here illegally. It eats vast amounts of vegetation, causing massive erosion problems in the Gulf Coast region in particular. There's also the threat of livestock grazing. A lot of these wetland areas are privately owned by an individual or a group of individuals who also graze livestock during the drier seasons. Now, livestock as a whole is not detrimental if it's properly managed, but properly managed is a difficult concept because you're dealing with cows, and cows are not easy to herd at all. Even though they are herdable, they're not easy to herd. There's also groundwater withdrawal, which we see in the Central Valley of California, which overall lowers the water table and causes dramatic changes in the quantity of water wetlands can hold. And a recent issue now facing due to climate change are wildfires. Because of the increasing size of wildfires, the frequency, and the devastation that they cause. So I'm going to give it over to Sam, and he will talk about what's next.
Alrighty, thank you, Colton, for that great explanation of what wetlands really are. And so what I'm going to be talking about today is what's being done and what can be done for the California wetlands currently. And as Colton mentioned, wetlands are one of the most productive ecosystems in the world, next to coral reefs and rainforests, of course. Now, we know that these wetlands are essential habitats for waterfowl, shorebirds, and even wetland-dependent species. And not to mention that they provide the most important environmental benefit as well. They filter and clean the surface of the water before it returns to aquifers or into the Pacific Ocean, which helps sequester carbon. The wetlands in California are affected to a point that they have lost almost 95% of its historic wetlands since the 1940s.
Wow.
A victim of the post-gold rush push to drain the swamps and put the land to quote-unquote better use. California's human population has grown so large and its massive agricultural output is so essential that we can't expect to restore these wetlands to their former eminence. Looking into a few policies regarding wetlands, I'll be discussing some of the acts and laws put into place by government employees as well as several environmental agencies. And I even got the inside scoop from someone on the board of directors from the San Francisco Bay Regional Water Board, which was very exciting to speak with him on a few different topics, because he says that due to the development of different businesses as well as housing developments, like they lose so many wetlands and they have to basically put them, which is called in kind. It's one of their terms that they use. So in kind means in like relative area. So it's like a 1 to 2 mile area from where you're taking that wetland, which you have to put it there so the species know where to go, unless you're basically putting it on a terminal hold, which is basically terminating it for a period of time. So going into a few of these policies put into place, the first one I'd like to highlight is the Federal Clean Water Act, specifically Section 404. It has a 3-part criteria to wetlands and what it characterizes a wetland as. So it has soil characteristics, of course, hydrophytic vegetation. I'm not sure I said that correctly, but I'm going to go with that. And then hydrology. And so hydrology, in a sense, is basically the study of distribution and movement of water on or below Earth's surface, which can impact water availability and conditions. So that's to do with like farming techniques and things like that, where they have different aqueducts and things like that to like move the water into their land so that they can farm it correctly. And it also permits the state to like have fill material to like change the direction of where that water goes.
Interesting.
So like back home, as you know, we have the Arroyo and the California aqueduct that goes into the Delta, and the Delta also connects up to the Pacific, up through the San Francisco Bay in Benicia. And so like that's all connected, and the Delta is fresh water. You can drive a boat on there. Yeah. But until you get to a certain point up north, it goes into salt water. Right. And so the wetland helps filter out all those sediments and all the salt water, helping the different species live in the wetland and also going back and forth. You've heard of a sturgeon before, correct?
Oh yeah, definitely.
You can find those in wetland or in the freshwater and the saltwater, and that's thanks to our wetlands, which is pretty cool.
Beautiful creatures.
Yeah, they're beautiful creatures, beautiful fish. Next, moving on, we have what's known as the no net policy. Now, I was not knowledgeable of this until I spoke to Brian, and Brian is a good friend of mine's who is on the regional board of directors from the San Francisco Bay, like water directors, something like that. I don't have his title sitting in front of me, but anyways,
he's very important.
He's very important. Yes. So what this was a EO, an executive order by the governor of California, and it was also endorsed by the Clinton administration at the time. It's a mitigation policy that helps to prevent the destruction and degradation of wetlands. And the goal of this EO was to achieve like a long-term increase of wetland acreage, including the functionality behind it, because they're very functional for the Central Valley in California, which is home to so many farms. And we know that California ships out like, I think it's 85% of their produce. I don't know the exact statistics on that, but still, it's huge. So like they need water, and then with our droughts, we're not holding on to that water. And I'll go more into that in a little bit. Moving on to a couple more that I'd like to talk about. There's this program called the Inland Wetlands Conservation Program, or the IWCP, and that's from the California Wildlife Conservation Board. Their mission as a whole for the program is to protect, restore, and enhance wetlands and associated habitats, all with a specific goal of improving and increasing wetland bird population sizes. So of course, when it comes to bird populations, you have your geese, you have your greenheads, you have your mallards, you have several different types of ducks, you have several different types of birds. I mean,
teal, sprig.
Yeah, we could go on and on with all these different birds that live here. And the jurisdiction of this program is really important to analyze, because it's called like the watershed of Central Valley, which is east of the San Francisco Bay. But what happens is that is all connected in through different basins. So you have the 9 basins that go down the east part of the state, starting with Red Bluff, which is up near Chico. And what happens, I mean, we all know that birds fly south for the winter, but there's a certain flight path that they follow, and those follow wetlands. I have a good friend that has a duck club, which is basically a home in the middle of wetlands and bogs, so you can go duck hunting.
Right.
And he has sent me videos in the past month of over 2,000 to 3,000 ducks flying above his head.
Wow.
That's very uncommon, because there's supposed to be so many other wetlands that we can go to, or ducks can go to, not we, as they fly down that flight path. But they're having a difficulty right now because of the wetlands that are being destroyed through, mitigations and through temporal loss and through developments. And it's very sad to see, because the more ducks over that club, the more duckies that are going to get smacked.
It's a difficult problem. There's a lot of issues facing it. There are ways that we can help.
Yes, there are. So moving on into my last point is California waterfowl's three-pronged approach. So California waterfowl is, of course, what we were just talking about with duck hunting and duck homes and things like that. Also partnering with Ducks Unlimited, which is a very widely known outdoor brand. So back to their three-pronged approach, it's known as restore, enhance, advocate, which is super important. So they want to, in hopes, accomplish like the next best thing for bringing back the wetlands to California. And they're trying to maximize the production of vegetation that provides the food for the wintering waterfowl, so the birds that are flying south for the winter. And they want to develop nesting and habitats to support the year-round resident waterfowl as well, because, as I said, like, they're losing all these wetlands. And the regional biologists in the Central Valley have seeded more than 10,000 acres to create the ideal nesting habitats near wetlands, which is very important. So their kind of policy for their program, the California Waterfowls program, is to advocate for laws and regulations that are beneficial to wetland restoration, enhancement, as well as management. So super important. Moving on, what we can do, or what anybody can do. A big one that is huge is buying duck stamps.
Buy them.
We got to buy the duck stamps, everyone. So what duck stamps are is they provide an easy way for anyone to protect a bird habitat conservation. It helps acquire and protect wetland habitats, and it also purchases conservation easements, which is cool. So this was created back in the 1930s, and since 1934, they have acquired over 6 million acres and built more than 300 national wildlife refuges.
Wow.
That's a lot. I don't have the football numbers, as you said, but
that's a lot more than 45 football fields.
A lot more. And what's cool with the duck stamps is it encourages landowners to practice the water conservation. So my friends that I was just mentioning, they buy duck stamps every single year through Ducks Unlimited. So they protect their land, and the government and state actually pump in water to their wetlands specifically.
Wow.
Because
that's great.
Try to give them the duckies the home, but they also they like to eat some duck poppers, which are like jalapeno bacon duck wrapped. It's delicious.
Oh, now you're making me hungry. Keep going.
We won't get into that right now. But anyways, what's super cool about the landowners doing the water conservation is they'll actually get a tax break from it, which is huge. So they're going to get money back from the government for the government to use their wetlands as a wetland rather than develop in that area, which, like, people are like, hey, I want to keep my land, I'm going to get a tax break on it, bada bing, bada boom. That's a win-win.
It's fantastic.
Killing two birds with one stone, no pun intended.
Totally intended.
And one thing I wanted to highlight real quick about, like, wetland protection organizations is there's actually 350,000 of them in the United States, and they employ over 16,000 people. Most of these are like small and nonprofit and only employ like 10 to 20 people, which means that they rely a lot on volunteers. But at the same time, that's super important to analyze, because it's like we need more protection organizations, especially with global warming and the process of what's our world's going to. So anyways, Colton, I think that we touched on many different points. You want to round us out with our conclusion?
To conclude, wetlands are a vital part of our environment. They provide habitats for a variety of fragile plants and animals, along with added benefits for humans, by providing flood prevention and natural water filtration. Due to the current issues facing wetlands in the state of California, there's a lot. Current issues There are a number of different advocacy groups and governmental programs and tax breaks that are being deployed to help fight these problems. But the easiest way that you and I and any other average Joe on the street can help is by buying duck stamps and to help support wetland conservation, along with being aware of the issues and voting to help the wetlands and save the wetlands. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us.